Welcome into the PFF State of the Franchise. It is your Oakland Raiders edition. Sam, crazy turnover this offseason in Oakland. It starts at the top. Jon Gruden coming out of the broadcast booth, now a head coach, but also a lot of player movement. Before we get into the specifics, what are your overall thoughts of what the Raiders are doing so far?
Yeah, well, they're changing how they're doing things. Gruden comes in, big splash move, finally coaxed him out of the Monday Night Football booth, which has been reported to be on the cards for years now. Reggie McKenzie, their GM, kind of takes a step back, a different role with Gruden assuming some more personnel control. And we're seeing how that's working out this offseason. There's a very specific type of player that they have been going after in this offseason, and it's an interesting one. It's a unique one. We brought in guys like Jordy Nelson, like Doug Martin, guys that we've seen play well in the past, but not necessarily in 2017 or the most recent tape we've got on them.
It's been the theme of free agency as a whole. Hey, if this guy gets back to previous levels, it seems like it's the theme of the Raiders free agent haul. So let's start with Jordy Nelson. He comes in, he's replacing Michael Crabtree. Crabtree's been an okay receiver, really good year in 2016, knows how to get open, but if Jordy can even just get back close to what he was before, this can definitely be an upgrade, especially opposite Amari Cooper.
Yeah, and it does rely on this idea that Jordy Nelson can get back to that play and that we haven't seen him start his decline because he's not the youngest receiver in the stable anymore. This is a guy that is coming off a bad year, albeit off the back of injuries, and is getting on. His wide receiver last year, the passer rating of quarterbacks when targeting Jordy Nelson alone, 72.6. That is a massive drop on what it usually is. Well over 100 with Aaron Rodgers in the building.
Brett Hundley's fault?
No, because Devontae Adams, wide receiver rating of 120.3. So you can't put it all on the fact that Aaron Rodgers wasn't there throwing in the ball for most of this time. Jordy Nelson, a definite decline. Over 110 in his last 6 healthy seasons. So we're talking about a decline of 40 points in production, essentially, in passer rating terms when targeting Jordy Nelson last season. You have to be, the whole gamble is whether he can get back to 110 or if 72 is an indication of his decline now.
Certainly some risk there, and then some risk, as you said, with Doug Martin being the guy in the backfield. Both of these positions feel like, hey, we could add some youth in the draft, and I think that ultimately is the best move to just continue to add some youth. But what can we expect from Martin at this point in his career?
I mean, Martin at this point is looking more and more like a one-season wonder. He's basically got that one great season, an 88.2 overall PFF grade back in 2015. That was his only season above 66 in terms of PFF grading. Even that rookie year where he had great games against the Raiders, the rest of that season wasn't great. So we're looking at a guy and saying the talent is definitely there. We've seen it that one season, but it's basically 2015 and hoping you can get that out of him consistently.
Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. I want to start in the secondary. There's been a lot of turnover there. Sean Smith is out. David Amerson is out. We have guys like Rashaan Melvin coming in. Gary Conley, last year's first-round pick, expecting him to see a lot more snaps, barely played 60 snaps last year. This looks like a secondary. Even last year we were saying it. There's some veterans, there's some youth. They feel like they could put it together, but it might be another year or two. Even more turnover. Is this a year that it's going to be a big jump forward for them, or do we still need to see this secondary develop because they're so young?
Well, a lot does hinge on the development of those young guys. Conley, Melifonwu as well at the back end. Those two guys need to play well this year for that secondary to be good. Melvin is a really interesting player, though, because he was a journeyman essentially last year. No significant grades of any kind of merit over his career, but had a half a season that was just fantastic. We only saw it for half a year before he got injured and got shut down, but 13 interceptions and pass breakups together, had an overall PFF grade of 85.7. That was fantastic. That put him between Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters. That's the kind of level he was playing at last season before he went back down. I have no idea why the Indianapolis Colts did not re-sign this guy given the money they have in terms of salary cap. I think that's a pretty good pickup for this Jon Gruden-led Oakland Raiders. I think there's a lot of potential there to work with given what we saw.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. I think Carl Joseph emerged as one of the better young safeties in the league last year. You mentioned Obi Melifonwu. He was a high second-round pick in 2017. Has all of the tools, size, movement skills. They even played him a little bit at corner, even though that was an ugly experiment. I think he feels like that guy that can cover tight ends and be that box safety that's that the league kind of needs. You know, that versatile, big safety. So there's a lot of potential in this secondary. That's the key word right now, though, until you find out more from can Melvin duplicate what you said, and can Gareon Conley be the guy that we thought he could be, because we had him as a first-round pick as well?
I mean, that really is the story of the offseason for this Oakland Raiders in terms of personnel decisions. They brought in a lot of guys. They've allowed a lot of people to walk out of the building. But the story of the people they brought in is potential. And can they get a certain level that we have seen in the past, but not necessarily in their most recent play? Can Jordy Nelson get back to the player we know? A wide receiver rating of 110. Is his career baseline. If he can get back to that, it's a massive upgrade for this team. Can Doug Martin be the player that we saw in 2015 but haven't really seen outside of that? Can Rashaan Melvin replicate what he did for half a season over a full year, or even just replicate it again, period, going forward? There's a lot of talent that they brought in, but all of it is risky. None of these guys are clean acquisitions.
All right, so we have to start looking forward to the draft, and we kind of match that up with the front seven. It feels like they've been looking for the complement opposite Khalil Mack for a few years now. Mack, one of the top edge defenders in the entire league, top 1, top 2, top 3, depending on which year it is. So he's outstanding off the edge. They bring in Bruce Irvin a couple years ago. He's been okay, providing some pressure. The sack totals have been there, but the consistent down-to-down disruptions not there. Is this a major need for them in the draft to find somebody opposite Khalil Mack, or is it just linebacker? It feels like they've just been lacking that true chase and run linebacker in the middle of that defense for a few years now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they bring back Navarro Bowman at some point during this offseason. He still remains unsigned. He was a fantastic addition for them last season during the year. Let go from the 49ers, went to Oakland, rediscovered some of his old form. Not back to the all-pro kind of player that we've seen from him before, but he was a legitimate, excellent run defender for the Raiders last season. He could definitely upgrade this unit as it currently stands, but either way, the front seven as a whole is where they need to target. That is their single biggest position of need, whether it's linebacker, whether it's edge rusher, whether it's an interior presence. Any of those positions, they could definitely stand to upgrade. Outside of that, I think they're better situated, and they're looking for depth players or players for the future. Tight end, they could still use a mismatch weapon. They've got Jared Cook. I don't know that you're ever going to see that kind of play out of him. They really need the guy to be the player that Jared Cook was supposed to be. Right. They could find that guy in the draft. They could look to bolster that offensive line. This was a lot of investment in that offensive line. Typically, teams do it through the draft. The Raiders did it through free agency. At some point, that's going to become too expensive to maintain. They need to start finding the successors from some of those players in the draft so that they can get a bit cheaper on that line. But I think they're in a good position in terms of focus on the front seven on defense and pick up depth where you can elsewhere.
If they are focused on the front seven, keep an eye on Roquan Smith out of Georgia, great linebacker that can play in coverage, can play the run, a 3-down presence, and maybe even our guy Harold Landry if they do want that true edge presence opposite Khalil Mack. We think he's the best pure edge rusher in the entire draft. Bradley Chubb, another solid player. I don't think he'll drop to 10 based off all the buzz in the NFL. We see him as a pretty good pick at 10 to 15 though, so if he was there, with another nice fit to complement Mr. Khalil Mack. That is your Oakland Raiders State of the Franchise, all powered by PFF Elite.